Hello everyone, let's have a look at the markets. It's going to be a brief update because we've been discussing all this recently and there hasn't been any relevant change so far, but I'm going to take a look at BTC, also SPX, DXY, and also some thoughts on inflation, oil, and what might come later this year. So, first of all, if you've been following me for a while, you know I posted this potential fractal. I'm not a big fan of fractals, but when I see some similarities, I just like to play with it and have them as reference. You remember I pointed out these double bottoms here, right, with the bullish divergence. Remember the regular ones are the ones the price makes a lower low, but the indicator makes a higher low, and that normally signs reversal, right? This was the first daily bullish divergence that was here in summer 2024, started in August, ended in September, like 2 months more or less, or yeah, kind of 2 months actually. And it started the reversal. You also might remember the change in the I'm gonna use a different color actually. Let's use this blue color. There was a trend, a change trend here in the RSI, right? It was clearly going down until the reversal, right? The bullish divergence, and we started like a new cycle, which coincided with the first overheated levels on the daily, and the start of a new bearish divergence here, right? Again, we don't know how long they could go, but I think it's pretty much obvious that these divergences, both bullish and bearish, have a strong impact in price. That's why you always have to check the higher time frame for more confirmation, because I think lower than daily it's just noise unless you're a trader. So we have spotted this change here as well, this trend change, right? We've mentioned this before. This was a clear downtrend with the bearish divergence here, the double top for now, and now this is the trend change. I first mentioned this bullish divergence, which was smaller mid-March, right? But with price making a lower low and the indicator making a higher low compared to this one, the bullish divergence was reinforced, in my opinion, and we can also already see the change in the trend, right? Like starting a new uptrend, daily uptrend like here. And if we take a look at the similarities, I also said that we are getting into the overheated territory here for this stock RSI. The last time it happened, we went down, the MA broke, and we retested the low, making a lower low actually. However, isn't it interesting that the similarities are so many here? So after printing this bullish divergence, we can see this stock RSI pretty much also hit these overheated levels while trying to break the trend line, right? You can see it here. It came back, it held the EMA and pushed again, right? We have these several overheated levels for a few days, for instance, September to the end of September, like 2 weeks. The trend line was broken, pretty much retested here, right? And we continued back up. So right now, we could say that here, this RSI level, we can clearly see it's right at the trend line, which was pretty much here, right? We had a small pullback, but it eventually broke. So what if we do the same now? It looks very similar. I mean, I'm not saying this has to happen again, but again, more confluence to confirm we are in a strong uptrend on the daily. these kind of uptrends, they start from the lower time frame and then reflected on the daily and then on the weekly, right? So if we see the weekly turning around, it's because the daily has been turning around for quite some time now. So if we zoom in, currently almost at 86k, it's almost breaking, trying to break this trend line. It could be today, and the fractal, it's interesting that it keeps playing out pretty much perfectly, right? We'll see how far it goes. If we go to the 4 hour, just to see any kind of overheating signals, we can see the 4 hours really trying to push. There is a change in tone right here, the oversold, completely oversold levels, right? And the bullish divergence here with this double bottom, perfect double bottom here on the 4 hour. It's oversold levels again triggered this rally, okay? And it keeps trying to go up. There's still room for that, so perhaps today we close above 86k. We'll see. And on the weekly, which is the most important time frame for me, for my strategy, similarities here again. We have this initial push. There's a different behavior here in the stock RSI, but the most important thing, as we have already discussed, was holding this RSI bottom, so to speak, and we did. Just a small fake out here, and we bounced from it. How about that? So the good thing is the MA is coming down pretty much like it did here, right at the breakout. Interesting confluence, and we are getting close to that. Something that will be key, in my opinion, because no one knows, right? Perhaps when the moment comes, BTC is testing 90k, 92, something like that. What if this comes down, BTC rejects, right? Instead of breaking and retesting like it did here. That would be very bad, and to me that would mean lower low, a lower high, sorry. We're cooked, right? And I'm not sure this could hold again, but perhaps by the time that happens, we are making this kind of a structure, right? In this case, we wouldn't, if this fractal keeps playing out, we wouldn't make a higher high, but we could make a higher low, and then high high, and the structure keeps going up. It's also interesting that it pretty much aligns with perhaps 150k, and this is the weekly, right? It went from December to pretty much March, right? Like 3 months. What if we reach these levels, we break, there is another divergence confirmed, and that's the last push. Well, that's going too far for now, but it's interesting nonetheless, right? So that's the state of BTC. It's in a very interesting moment right now. It keeps trying to break for now, but we'll see if it eventually does. A quick look at SPX, because we know it is important for BTC, although BTC has been showing way more strength than stocks. I guess it's mostly because the tariffs don't hit BTC. But these are the levels that I pointed out long ago. This is the top in 2024, which the first top, right, acted as resistance here again. It broke, retested it pretty much perfectly, textbook breakdown retest. Here, after losing it, it was rejected by the 200 moving averages, which I have already mentioned that before. It was like a V-shape recovery. This kind of V-shape was rejected hard here. Now, that's something we don't like. And I also mentioned these daily gaps. The first one was closed here, and for the second one we still have room, which would bring the SPX to 5,000, almost 600, right? The thing is, I want to see the reaction when it comes back to this support, which pretty much will align with the 200 moving average. That I think that's key, right? Reclaiming this level would be huge. I expect perhaps an initial rejection, maybe hold here and try again. That would be very bullish, but I'm not really sure about the strength in the SPX. But this pause, after being announced here, right? This pause should prepare the markets at least for quite some time. I want to mention the DXY because it's been gaining a lot of traction lately, and I posted back in November, mid-November, right, when it was at the top of this huge range that started in 2022, right? That could be reaccumulation, it could be distribution, we don't know until one of these sides breaks, right? So I posted, like, according to RSI and stock RSI, this is the weekly, remember, it was overheated, it was testing also the top of the range, so there was much confidence for either break and risk assets were in trouble, or just perhaps come down and give them some room to breathe, right? The RSI and the stock RSI rolling. And what happens, for the DXY was this. Okay, this is the post. Post is right here. Sorry, this is the, I'm not saying that was the post, it was mid-November. This is January, right? I posted that the DXY was turning around, right? And you should track the signals, and this was the signal. Okay, it had a fake out. It won't make it easy for most people, and that's for sure. The markets otherwise would be easy. We had this fake out that apparently was good for the red path, right? But all this overheating was actually suggesting that the most probable or most likely path would be the green one, and it happened later. And right now we are right at this support again, this macro support level, while the RSI is hitting very oversold levels, stock RSI completely as well, right? And I posted here that the DXY was turning around. Back then, when I posted it, right here, we would argue there was no divergence here, perhaps here, right? But I wasn't using the weekly in this case to determine the turnaround. I went to the daily, right? You can see here in the daily, the tweet has gone too far away. Okay. Here in the daily, the story was different. Again, for confirmation, when I see the weekly overheated or the monthly, I just go to a lower time frame and see and look for some signals and weakness, right? So we had these divergence here, right? It was building for quite some time, and the moment I posted it here, right, what happened? The daily had broken and rejected, right? So the divergence was being confirmed. We can also see it's going down and weakness, and this together with the overheating in the higher time frame, that's why I thought it was turning around, right? It had been running for quite some time, and it was time for it to cool off, right? There was no various divergence here, the weekly, but the overheated levels, like 70 something, we could argue that it could go even higher. Sure, it did back here in the bear market for risk assets, right? Actually, this was kind of a low of top move, which is something people would love to see in stock markets or even BTC. The thing is, this is due for a bounce, right? Look at the oversold levels and the bottom of this range, which so far these weeks, it's kind of, we could say that it's holding it, right? So far holding it. I think this is due for a bounce. The thing is, perhaps small bounce and a rollover. I'm not really sure the XY will lose these levels. This has been support for quite some time, and if they are lost, we might perhaps test 95, something like that. I'm not really interested in that. I just wanted to point out how I once again use the oscillators, the indicators to I'm not gonna say predict, because this is not a prediction, just a call, a bet, we could say. And I also wanted to highlight that in March, early March, I posted the correlation between BTC, oil, and inflation, right? And back when I was charting this, I saw that BTC was lagging, right? In both directions. I saw that because here we saw the oil going down back in 2020 with inflation obviously going down. BTC did nothing for quite some time, and then it came back up. And people could say it's going up together with oil and inflation. What's going on? To me, this is lag. BTC is here representing this drop, right? And when it started, the oil and inflation started going up for quite some time, BTC found its stop, right? So these started reflecting this chop. This was the market, besides being overheated, this was the market seeing that there was a bigger problem that wasn't temporary, right? And when it kept going up, BTC eventually crashed, right? It kept going up. Oil topped first, inflation topped later. BTC is still finding its bottom. It crashed down, right? Both oil and inflation crashed down. BTC did nothing. Why? If it should run when these are going down, because they were still going down. BTC is also, as I said, normally lags. So when it completely came down, BTC started to run, right? Later. Started to move after it had been going down for quite some time, right? Oil again, when it oil peaked, crawled back up together with a little bit of inflation. We had some chop, BTC corrects. It was also overheated, so you have several signs, right? And when it came, the inflation, oil came back down, it was reflecting BTC price. So this crash, what's this crash about? My opinion, this was the peak again in inflation, crawling back up together with oil, right? This was March. We can see the this is the monthly chart, by the way. So the CPI, the inflation was still just stopped in January in 2025. We still had to reflect this drop in oil. That's why I said that inflation, oil resumed its downtrend in January, right? Inflation has just represented in this monthly chart, and that BTC is now retracing the inflation that resumed in September together with oil, right? This peak is what is retracing now. So if we open that chart, what we can see now is this was the end of the chart that I just presented. This was January, and this is the drop from 3% to 2.4% in March, right? Oil kept going down. BTC is already curling up, okay? And look what we have here. We have another push from oil. What do we think that could happen to inflation, right? So this downtrend is still pending to be reflected in price. This drop started to curling up in BTC, right? And this has to still be represented, this drop in inflation. Okay, this is why it looked like they go up at the same time, which I still believe is not. They do not. It's just BTC lagging, and this has to be represented in price, reflected, right? Um, I also wanted to mention this in relationship, right? This chart, as I say, might look a little bit messy. I just try to separate it with colors. So BTC rises together with inflation. That's what many think. But what's actually happening is a delay, as I said, right? We can see drop in inflation, later push in BTC, inflation catches up, BTC tops, right? Inflation keeps going up, BTC eventually drops, inflation stabilizes, BTC runs, etc. So this, if we go back to 2024, this drop in inflation is later reflected BTC, this rise in inflation, BTC retracing, and now this was posted in March, so it is lower. This is 2.8, which is now 2.4. This, I posted it when it was at 88, 81k. It still had to go down to 76 or something. This drop in inflation is still to be reflected here, and I still believe so, right? So people want just the immediate price action. They say they invest for the whole cycle or for several weeks or months, but then they check the price every 5 minutes and get desperate when all this chop destroy their bags, right? So I think you have to bear all this information in mind. Otherwise, they will just shake you out here and make you chase around here, which is dangerous, by the way, because normally people become very bullish when testing high time frame levels, which, by the way, should act as resistance, at least at first, right? So there's still chop. Prices still need to climb back to and reclaim crucial levels. And I also wanted to mention the situation for several altcoins, right? Because the big accumulations and the start of big moves happen when normally people are not paying attention, right? Everyone is now glued to BTC price, but at the same time, if you believe altcoins could run next, you should be paying attention to them, right? This is one that I wanted to chart just to take a look at it, because back in 2024, I remember I paid attention to this. Again, I didn't buy this, and it was a big miss, but you can't catch them all, right? So it was like a 9 or 10x move. Insane. That's why I said that we don't know how long all these RSI legs can be reflected in price, how high, right? It could be insane like this, it could be just a smaller move. But the thing is, after reclaiming the MA, price accelerates. We don't know how high. That's the tricky part of the market. But Pepe is one of the few coins that looks like it's about to cross on the weekly. Perhaps this is just a rejection, right? Right now it's curling. It's still Tuesday, but what if it's a break, right? It could be perfectly. And if we switch to the BTC dominance chart, we can see on the weekly that the bearish divergence is still playing out. BTC is reaching this week, right, at 64.46 more or less. Overheated. Still the divergence playing out. If I go to the monthly, situation is also getting a bit stretched, right? Very high RSI levels, the highest actually. Stock RSI is still not pushing as much, but if I go to the daily, we can see that the bearish divergence is still, I'm gonna remove this. It's still playing out, right? And the thing is, for now, I think it's about to break, but it could also be a rejection here. I would be very bullish for alts. A rejection and confirm the bearish divergence. In any case, we are reaching very overheated levels for BTC dominance in every time frame, daily, weekly, and monthly, you should ask yourself, if you were to invest, if this was a coin and you were thinking about investing on it, would you really chase here, right? After this huge run, many people would say, look at this, how strong it is, retested here, bounced, new leg. Is it though? I still need to see it really going further. We have this little drop here, the daily after this divergence. So when I see all these levels that it's reaching now, right, I would really need to ask myself if this is the place to add or to the risk if you were invested in it. And I go to the monthly. Boy, I wouldn't buy this if this was a coin, right? Look at the huge run. It broke for the first time in 2022, March. Look at the levels. Is this the moment to buy? Actually not. This drop here in the monthly, if it breaks, as we have mentioned in several videos, we could have this, the old season everybody wants, right? I wouldn't buy this. I wouldn't even touch it, right? It's like, okay, I've missed the whole leg. That's it. I'm going to look for something else. You wouldn't buy this if it was a coin, right? So why do people believe it still has so much room left? At least with my indicators, the indicators I use, they are telling me, hell no. The thing is, it could still take some time, right? And if you are glued to the hourly or even daily chart, you could still believe that this will never end, right? Sorry. This will never end because it keeps pushing and pushing, right? And it seems it will never stop. I wouldn't bet on this, right? It's been climbing non-stop since the bottoming 21, 22. It was clearly bottoming range distribution, right? And when it broke, it hasn't stopped yet, like several small corrections along the way. I wouldn't buy this. So, isn't it interesting that inflation is coming down? Oil is coming down, so inflation will come down further, in my opinion, because to me, oil is the main driver. You can see the clear relationship between inflation and oil, right? Right when BTC dominance is reaching these levels, right when some coins like Pepe, which I just saw, are shaping up so good, when Ethereum BTC, I'm gonna use the weekly, it's reaching these kind of bottoms, still not fully here, right? With these oversold levels flashing, as I mentioned in a different post, isn't that a coincidence, right? That the rate cut should be coming sooner than later because inflation is falling and dropping hard, while BTC dominance is so overheated. ETH BTC so oversold to, back to 2019, 2020 levels. Altcoins shaping so strong for now. Isn't that a coincidence that apparently loosen monetary conditions might come sooner than we expect, than many expect, when everyone is saying that there won't be an old season, that this time is different? Wouldn't be hilarious that actually the same thing happened, right? The 4-year cycle would coincide with the Q4 this year. I don't know if it will happen exactly. I'm just going to the risk, probably completely, at the end of the next weekly cycle, right? The next weekly cycle, when I spot some weakness, whatever it is, I will completely sell my bags, my altcoin bags, and wait for more clarity. I would rather leave money on the table than back hold and round trip it all and now pray again for the markets to save me. Nah, that's not my strategy. So I think the time for BTC outperforming is over. I think BTC dominance is showing that. It is increasing because during all this chop, if the market is going to react, BTC should lead. So I think it makes sense for BTC dominance to keep going up for now, but then I think it will be all because the ones that will outperform. So that's it. Let's see if this trend line on the daily can finally break, right? It's really trying after this low. We might see, and the key is to hold 84 in my opinion. 84, something like that. I think it was around here. 84, right? This is key level to establish a higher low. We'll see how it goes. We will pay attention to the weekly close and see if BTC is finally confirming this trend reversal, like here. And in hindsight, it could be very obvious, right? The playbook has been very similar, right? Push, overheating levels, right here. Kind of a distribution while losing strength, right? Overheated levels, kind of a distribution with a double top while losing strength. And then a change in the trend with a bullish divergence, and we're back again. I think this is kind of Wall Street kind of move. But the thing is, we just have to learn how to read it and how to write it. So I'll keep you updated and see you soon.